Welcome back to another KLIM product comparison. I'm Lucas, and today we're looking at the tried and true fan favorite Krios Pro helmet versus the all-new in spring 2025 KLIM X1 Alpha helmet. We're just going to go down a list of the features and the differences between these two to help you understand why one or the other might be best for you. If you guys have questions about the X1 or the Krios Pro, check out the respective walkthrough videos for both. We also have a really cool video about the X1 Alpha featuring Jason Plummer, and he talks through kind of the development and the history of this helmet. So if you want to deep dive into the meat on the bones of the X1 Alpha, check out those videos right now on the YouTube channel. For now, we're just going to dive right into the differences between these two. First things first, Krios Pro on my right, your left. This one's coming in at the current market price of $750 US, and the X1 Alpha is coming in at $875 US. Now, the next question that's on everybody's mind for these helmets is weight. The Krios Pro used to have an ECE 2205 certification. Now it has an ECE 2206. In bumping up to meet that new safety standard, we had to add about 40-ish grams to the helmet. And keep in mind, when we get the weights of these helmets, that is an aggregate of all the colors for that size. So when they weigh a certain size, we're going to be talking about size large today, but when they weigh a certain size, that's the average of the ones with the graphics, the ones with plain carbon, which weigh less because there's less material on them, there's less paint on them. So just keep that in mind when we're looking at weights. Your helmet, if you weigh it at home, might weigh a little bit different from what we're publishing today. So when we're talking about the Krios Pro bumping up to that ECE 2206 certification, the weight went up to 1490 grams, and the X1 Alpha is at 1550. So they're quite close. Yes, the X1 Alpha is technically a little bit heavier. That's under the 3.5 pound range for both of these helmets. So the next question when we talk about these helmets is the shell, obviously. Now, both of these helmets have a full carbon fiber shell. They both use a pre-preg carbon fiber weave. That means the resin is already pre-ingrained into that carbon fiber weave. So when it's put into the helmet shape, when it's molded into this shape, it actually doesn't have those inconsistencies and excess resin buildup in certain places or not enough resin in certain places, bubbles, things like that. It's just a much more premium way of manufacturing carbon fiber helmets. Now, the Krios Pro has two shell sizes and it just uses a standard carbon weave. Now, when we get to the X1 Alpha, this one also has pre-preg carbon fiber, just like the Krios Pro that I mentioned, but instead of two shell sizes, we have three shell sizes with the size large. The peak of the bell curve of most of our riders are being in a size large. So the size large helmet is its own shell. Everything is optimized for the size large, and then we also have a shell that is smaller than the large and the shell that's larger. So three shell sizes, two shell sizes. Also, the carbon fiber in the X1 Alpha is a more premium, called a 3K carbon weave. It's a little bit finer material in terms of the width of the carbon, and it looks very premium when it's up in a plain carbon shell, which you can't see today on these colors, but if you look at the plain carbon online or in a dealership, for example, you'll see it's a really premium, really uniform carbon fiber look to the shell, and that's because it is. It's really uniform and very consistent throughout the whole shell. Now, another big difference between these two helmets is the peak visor and the way it attaches and the way it adjusts. Krios Pro uses a thumb screw on the top right here, and then some quarter turn fasteners right here on both sides. Those are quite easy to manipulate. However, there's something to get lost in the field. They can get jammed up with dust over time, so just a little bit more maintenance intensive compared to the X1 Alpha, which uses, I can actually do this on camera very easily, which uses a push button on the top, and it slides through a track of 3 preset positions, like that. And then the final position takes it out, and as it rolls forward, it actually just comes right out from the side. It's got some little cam lock sort of devices here on the side that are completely tool-free. And now you actually can keep running this helmet in street mode without even having to reattach the peak visor. The Krios Pro, you got to put those fasteners back in. So peak visor situation, much more convenient and easier to use with the X1 Alpha. Glove friendly. You can literally, we don't recommend it, but if you're talented, someone can probably take this off while they're riding. For the record, we don't recommend that. And then to put it back in, very simple. Line up those two posts on the sides, apply some pressure to the sides, rotate backwards, and they lock right into place. Then you find on the top the biggest hole. This is like a walkthrough, but faster. If you want actual product details, go to, there we go, go to the full walkthrough where I walk through all the details of this helmet. Anyways, point here is peak visor is much easier to use on the X1 Alpha. In this case, is the Krios Pro bad? No, it's not. It's just an older design. This is brand new, cutting edge, in-house developed technology on the X1 Alpha. Oh, and one more thing I did forget to mention about the X1 Alpha peak visor. If you look down through the top, it's got 70% more coverage, so fewer gaps. And the reason for this is when you're riding in the sun, you get less sun poking through those holes. You see how big the holes are in the Krios Pro. You get a little bit less sun intrusion through the X1 Alpha peak visor. And if you're wearing a transitions or a photochromic face shield, you're going to get a little bit less shadow marks from that sunlight going through that shield. I'm sure you guys have seen that. If you were on a photochromic face shield on the Krios Pro, you may have seen how the light and the shadow can cast a pattern. We're trying to reduce that with this also aerodynamically tested peak visor. Now the next thing is ventilation. X1 is going to be more ventilated than the Krios Pro. Up here on the Krios Pro, on the top, there's an adjustable forehead vent and an adjustable chin vent. Just like that, on off. Exhaust vents on the back. Internally, you can see here, we're going to go over this later as well, but you can see through this Koroyd and EPS structure, hot air flows through this and then gets pulled away by the vents. However, there's a downside to that, which I will address what the upside is on the X1 Alpha, but that is when the sun bakes this helmet shell, it has an easier time with that heat transmitting through the EPS and the Koroyd because there's just one layer of EPS, one layer of Koroyd. X1 Alpha, a little bit better at heat management. 2 vents on the upper forehead, perfectly synchronized with the intake holes there on the peak visor. And these also have little nodes on them you can feel with your gloves. So intake vents, fully adjustable on the forehead. 2 chin vents on the bottom. One here, this is a direct cabin vent. This one up here is the defogger vent. Pushes air through the defogger diffuser up here that you can't really see, but watch the walkthrough video to get a much better look at this. And then, as we're talking about heat management, we're going to come back to EPS and Koroyd as well, but while we're on the heat management note, you can see the ventilation channels built into the X1 Alpha EPS here, running here through the forehead vents, and then also inside. You can see the vents there channeled through the EPS that is sandwiched between, channeled through the EPS, which is sandwiching the Koroyd between the 2 EPS layers. So what this does is this upper EPS layer will help shield and protect that heat coming from the shell being baked in the sun from transmitting through to your head. So it's just a little bit of a step up above the Krios Pro in that regard. The next big set of differences between these 2 helmets is the face shield and the side plate mechanism. You can't see it here because I don't have the peak visor taken off, but there's a mechanism in here that allows the Krios Pro to have preset positions. What it doesn't have is a crack mode right here at the bottom. It goes from the first step to full closed. That was a common complaint with this helmet, was everything's great except there's no crack mode for really, really heavy fogging. We fixed that on the X1, we'll get to that in a second. The other thing that the Krios Pro does have is this mechanism here is a little bit simpler than the X1. Okay, you have to calibrate it with a set of screws inside here to get the right tension on here as it wears out, or if you replace the face shield. It's a little bit more maintenance intensive, but it can be done. Now, what that does do, however, is save weight. This mechanism here on the Krios Pro is lighter than the X1 Alpha. The X1 Alpha, I can show you very easily, thanks to the tool-free functionality here. And here you can see the X1 Alpha and how it can go into crack mode right there with a thin little few millimeter gap there at the bottom, and then into its first detent position and the rest of the way up. This mechanism is a little bit more expensive and a little bit heavier than what's on the Krios Pro. However, this face shield mechanism is self-calibrating. You don't have to calibrate it the way you have to calibrate the Krios Pro face shield, so it's always going to keep it perfectly cinched against that EPDM gasket there underneath the face shield. And the last thing to mention on the X1 Alpha face shield mechanism here is the way this mechanism is designed. It's designed to prevent early wear from dust and excessive opening and closing. We put this through rigorous torture testing of opening and closing over and over and over again, and the whole idea there is to keep it running for a long, long time for you. The next big difference between these 2 helmets is the face shields. Both come with a photochromic face shield you can swap to, and they also both come with a pin lock lens insert for anti-fogging that you can install. However, that's where the differences begin. The X1 Alpha has Super HD vision, which is our terminology for how it refracts less light coming through the lens, basically. So if you can imagine you have a lens, light comes through it. In a lower quality lens, that light will get refracted and not all of it's going to get to your eye, so things aren't going to appear as clear. With Super HD, less of that light is refracted and it comes right through the lens and things look clearer, basically. There's also less optical distortion in this face shield, and there's also infrared heat shielding in the photochromic and tinted lenses. So under the sunlight, like in a car with tinted windows, that infrared shielding is going to keep heat from building up inside that helmet big time. And one of the most special things about the face shield in the X1 Alpha is that when you install that Pinlock X120 XLT lens, the anti-fogging lens, you actually maintain optical class 1 clarity. Optical class 1 is the highest class of clarity for protective eyewear. So that's a huge accomplishment there for running a clear lens with the Pinlock 120 XLT insert and maintaining that optical class 1 clarity. The next difference is a little more nuanced, but we're going to dive into it, and that is the face shield gasket. The Krios Pro has a standard PVC gasket. It's a little bit firmer to the touch when compared to the EPDM gasket that is in the X1 Alpha. This is much softer, and this is actually automotive grade material that you use in car doors. So when the face shield closes on the X1 Alpha, it's a quieter, softer experience than the Krios Pro. The other thing the team built into the X1 Alpha is a little bit of a rain gutter system here where, not in all conditions, but in typical rainy conditions, we're going to help channel rain down around the sides of the helmet and not running down into your eyes. So obviously, if you're in a crazy downpour with the face shield open, you're probably going to get wet, but we're trying to mitigate some of those water drops making it into the face area of the helmet. The other benefit of the EPDM material here is that it's not as prone to UV degradation as the PVC material that's on the Krios Pro and many other helmets out there on the market. The next big difference is something I just already touched on, which is the Krios Pro Colroyd and EPS material layup compared to the X1 Alpha EPS and Colroyd material layup. This is a sandwich material like you saw. And as you can see inside here, there are huge oversized ear cups in the EPS for speakers for almost any comm system. And it actually comes with noise damping foam, basically, that comes inside those ear cups from the factory. So you can pull those out if you need to get more space to put in speaker cups in there, or you can leave the noise damping material here in the ear area. That's something that the Krios Pro does not have. But again, there are tremendous benefits to the EPS Colroyd sandwich construction here compared to the construction that's in the Krios Pro. And a big one is impact force absorption, where this has really, really good impact force absorption where we use a combination of these materials. Obviously, both helmets do pass ECE 2206, but the big thing as well is vent channeling, which we can do both on the interior and exterior of this assembly, and heat management from the sun baking the shell and that heat transmitting through. This is almost like putting a little bit of a cooler in between you and the heat from the sun to keep you cooler, and any hot air that is between these two materials can get pulled away by the air that's moving through the vents and through these channels. Now the next step is the internals. On these pads and the crown liner in here on the X1, we're using a burr cooling material. It's going to wick sweat, wick moisture, keep you cool. It's antibacterial. And the cool thing here is we have universal cheek pads across all helmets. So whether you need a 20 millimeter cheek pad or a 40 millimeter cheek pad, it's compatible across all helmets. We're also actually planning on releasing a shim kit to help you shim out the crown liner and other parts of this helmet that might not be universally compatible, where the crown liner is tied to the EPS size of the helmet just for the dimensions of how all the fasteners work together. But we're planning on releasing a shim kit where you can shim out certain portions of the of the crown liner that you might need to have some extra support in certain areas. So we're really trying to fine tune this fit for you because obviously everybody's head shape is different. No one helmet can fit every person on the planet. The other benefit we have in here on the X1 Alpha is this chin skirt. This is a little more comfortable to put on over your face, over your nose. If you got a big nose like me and you got to get your nose past this chin skirt here, which is going to also reduce buffeting. Now jumping over to the Krios Pro. The Krios Pro uses single density foam cheek pads in here and crown liner as well, and doesn't have quite the level of adjustability across sizes to go between different cheek pad thicknesses. You can still do it, but you don't have as much adjustability as the X1 Alpha. Same thing with the crown liner, and then of course the chin skirt here is not as comfortable to put on as the X1 Alpha. So you still have that cooling material in here. It's not burr, but it is a cooling material, and it's also antimicrobial. So it's just a little bit of a step down in terms of features compared to the X1 Alpha, and adjustability as well compared to the X1 Alpha in the cheek pad and crown liner situation here on the Krios Pro. We actually designed the cheek pad cutouts on the X1 Alpha to accommodate glasses, so you can fit glasses inside this helmet more easily than you can on the Krios Pro. Now the last big question that we have to answer is whether or not the X1 Alpha has a D-ring or a fidlock the way the Krios Pro has. The answer is the X1 Alpha comes with a set of titanium D-rings. Now, The reason for that is, at the time we were certifying this helmet to pass all the safety standards, the landscape of quick release helmet buckle testing procedures and test requirements and everything wasn't exactly clear. So to circumvent all of that uncertainty, we went with tried and true and trusted D-rings for the X1 Alpha. Now, that being said, we still have full faith and 100% confidence in the FidLock system for motorcycle helmets. We have it on the Krios Pro, on the F5, on the F3 Carbon and the F3 Carbon Pro, both for snow and for motorcycle. So there's no doubt in our minds that the FidLock system works. However, in the moment in time we were going through the testing procedures and processes for the X1 Alpha helmet, it was a safer bet to keep the timeline moving to go with the D-rings in this case. Now, that being said, we understand there are merits and drawbacks to both. The good news is the D-ring, like I said, that system is tried and true. You can infinitely adjust it once you put it on. If you're wearing a neck buff or something else around your neck and your face, you can adjust that, whereas the FidLock doesn't have that level of adjustability while you're wearing it. However, it is more convenient to put on and off. So they both have merits and drawbacks. In this case, let that be one of the guiding factors when you decide between the X1 Alpha and the Krios Pro. But remember all the good things I said about the X1 Alpha in this case. There's a lot of amazing technology packed into this helmet. Now, before we wrap this video up, we got a couple more little details to go over here. One of which is the large for large helmet shell size exterior dimensions on the X1 Alpha are smaller than the Krios Pro. So that means less drag, less noise, less mass overall on your head compared to the Krios Pro, large for large. So we like that a lot for the X1 Alpha. That's a really cool accomplishment there to get that size large perfectly optimized for the size large rider, which most people who buy motorcycle helmets are the size large. Of course, we know throughout the bell curve, people wear medium, small, extra large, double X all across the whole board, but we're really optimizing this X1 Alpha helmet for size large with its own helmet shell size and EPS thickness and everything else that goes in there. And then the small shell size and system and the larger shell sizes for the XL and 2X, those are still going to be more optimized than the Krios, which, like I said earlier, only has 2 shell sizes compared to 3 for the X1 Alpha. Also, I was talking about the chin skirt and everything on the X1 Alpha. I forgot to mention, this is a tighter seal on this helmet than the Krios Pro, so we're going to seal that noise and seal the wind out a little bit better on this helmet than on the Krios Pro. We really worked hard on getting this neck roll and the chin skirt and everything to be really comfortable, but also snug enough to keep the wind noise out and keep the buffeting down. And that's about it for the differences between the Krios Pro and the X1 Alpha helmets. If you guys have any more questions, I suggest you watch the walkthrough videos and the introducing the X1 Alpha helmet and behind the design video for the X1 Alpha helmet. If you guys still have more questions after that, hit us up in the comments below. We'll be happy to answer your questions and let you know what we got going on with these helmets. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.